The Republican Congressman Nathaniel Moran joins us, who represents the state of Texas. All right, Congressman, welcome to the show. It's good to have you on. We just had former President Trump in California. Let's talk a little bit about what he's saying on the trail. Immigration, big topic. The Springfield, Ohio story has been the way it's kind of manifested itself. He talked about that again, not about the pets and all the stuff where there's no evidence, but about the issue and what he says he would do about it. Here's what he said a short time ago.
I can say this, we will do large deportations from Springfield, Ohio. Large deportations. We're going to get these people out. We're bringing them back to Venezuela. You know, he told Biden he's not accepting anybody back. They moved all their criminals, not all of them, but the rest are moving in now. They emptied their jails in Venezuela, emptied their criminals, emptied the nests. They call them nests of bad people. They're all now in the United States, and they're now taking over cities.
I'm not sure where the reference to Venezuela came in that particular part of it, or the nests, but your thoughts on what you heard from the former president today?
Well, Connell, the underlying issue still remains the same. When you see a city the size of Springfield, 60,000 people, see 15 to 20,000 illegal immigrants now in their city that they're going to have to take care of through their schools and through their hospital systems and just frankly through all the infrastructure that's needed, it's impossible for a city that size to sustain that amount of influx. There's going to have to be deportations once President Trump gets into office. I'm certain we'll do it in a humane manner, but it needs to be systemic. We cannot allow 11 million people plus that have come in this country to remain in this country as it currently stands.
Do you think that's really the answer, the mass deportations, or that would even be supported by someone like, say, the Republican governor of the state? Didn't sound to me like Mike DeWine would be in support of something like that. He wants more resources. He wants more money. He even wants the federal government to do more for the city and his state. What do you say?
Well, what the federal government should do initially is stop the influx. And I've said that for years is we need to stop the influx of immigration at the border initially. I mean, that's the first thing to do. And once we get a handle on that, then we can begin to remove those that we do not need in this country. Certainly do that in a humane and systemic process. But the answer is not to give more money to the local states. To just keep them here indefinitely. That is not the answer. That just explodes the national debt even further than where it is now. The first, the primary, the single most important answer is secure the border today, right now.
The other thing, as I said, the former president talked a lot about today, played a clip already at the top of the broadcast, was crime. Talked about Vice President Harris in California, but also he's in this dispute about some of the crime figures, the FBI figures that show violent crime coming down. He says that's not true. We have some crime figures that deal with immigration, which you and I were just talking about from your state. What would you say about when you see things like this? Because when you look at crime rates, this is in Texas, where you see among violent crimes, property crimes, drug violations, the undocumented immigrants, by the stats at least, less likely to commit violent crimes compared to U.S.-born citizens or legal immigrants. Your thoughts?
If you go back to the comparison of the statistics that were being cited the other night on the debate, the FBI statistics, the way they kept those statistics changed a few years ago, and they do not accurately reflect what's going on. There are other associations that have much more precise statistics. That's what President Trump is relying on. When you see the statistics about immigration connected to crime in this country, I think what you need to say initially is one crime is too many. And one crime by a person that should have been prevented from entering this country at its border is too many. We know that there have been members of the terrorist watch list that have come over. We know that there have been more than 30,000 Chinese come over in just the past year alone. People from countries with terrorist connections like Iran and Afghanistan and other countries in the Middle East, where we do not need folks that are adversarial to us coming through our southern border. They're coming across in droves, and we've got to ask her a question.
So it's a case of two things that can be true, right? You're not disputing, it doesn't sound to me, the figures. You're not disputing the stats here, at least on the ones we put up there. You're just saying that one crime's too many, that the immigration is a problem, and both could be true. Is that the point? Am I getting it right?
Well, I haven't seen those stats, and I appreciate you flashing them on the screen, but frankly, statistics can be true or untrue, and we both know that. There's lies, there's damn lies, and there's statistics, right? I mean, that's the way it works. So we can manipulate this any way we want to from a standpoint of numbers, but the truth remains we need to enforce our rule of law at the border. and make sure that people are adhering to our rule of law. And right now, not only are the immigrants not doing that, our administration is not doing that, and that's the really horrible thing that's going on today.
And one more thing on the campaign big picture. I wonder how you see the race right now. It's so close, it seems. We're going to talk about Pennsylvania later, where the vice president is. All 7 of the swing states are so close. Donald Trump has been picking up a lot of flack, even in his own party, Lindsey Graham and others, Marjorie Taylor Greene, for hanging out with this woman named Laura Loomer, who's on the far, far fringes of the conservative movement, if you even want to call it that, conspiracy theories, racist comments, all the rest. He was asked about her today and said this.
Well, she brings a spirit to us that a lot of people have. We have very spirited people. And in all fairness to her, she hates seeing what's happened to the country, I guess. I mean, she hates seeing what's happened to the country. So do I. It's very sad. It's very sad.
You okay with this, Congressman? The association of the Republican nominee and former president with a person like Laura Loomer?
Well, I don't know her personally. I'm not going to comment on her, but here's what I would say is the Republicans, in my estimation, should represent and should always represent not just the values of what we believe, but how we go about our business. I think there's a moral basis that we have to continually be founded on. That's one of the things that I continually talk about to my folks in East Texas, and I'm proud to represent folks that are rooted not just in faith, but family and freedom all together, and that's the kind of values that we want to continue to promote going forward.
Now, you see the race is close, I assume, or maybe not in Texas, or maybe in Texas. We always talk about it, and then it ends up going red, but what about this year?
No, I think we're looking at the trifecta this year. I think we're going to have the House, the Senate, and the presidency, and that's what we need to reverse the failed policies of the Biden administration to get back to lower taxes, lower regulation, extend the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, make sure that we have fair trade across the globe, that we have innovation, and that we release our energy, because that economic driver in this world is going to help us with our foreign policy, help us to avoid military conflicts around the world, but it starts with economics. We got to get our own house in order.
Interesting. We'll see if you get all 3. I mean, the numbers we have, the House and the White House, are pretty much a jump ball, but very, very close, whereas you're right about the Senate. Advantage Republicans right now. Congressman, thanks for coming on. We appreciate it. State of Texas.